Welcome to Season 5 of SheVentures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. SheVentures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their work. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at SheVenturesPodcast.com. This woman's career started with a brief stint in the music and entertainment industry. She found her passion in teaching and decided to pursue a master's degree at NYU in general and special ed. She taught at a charter school in New York City, and while she loved teaching her students, she found herself becoming increasingly depressed and anxious. After some soul-searching, she quit her stable teaching job to pursue her first entrepreneurial venture, a tutoring business called Teacher on the Go. About a decade ago, she founded her current business, the Non-9 to 5, to help primarily women transition to find their true purpose. I would like to welcome Jen Shultz. Jen, welcome to SheVentures.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. Just hearing all those details was really amazing.
It's all you.
It is.
Everything you've achieved. So after college, I found this really intriguing because I also did things that right after college that ended up not being my passion. So you worked briefly in the music and entertainment industries. What did you do?
Yeah. So after college, I worked for a record label. I was I don't really remember exactly what my title was, but I did marketing for them. And it's really interesting to even think back to them because this was in the early 2000s where we were using CDs.
I know. When you said that, I was envisioning, you remember the Virgin Megastore on 42nd Street?
Well, yes. And the Virgin store on 14th Street in Union Square, I went to all the time. I'd be dancing in the aisles. I'd be listening to music there. I love that store. And I was so sad when they closed it down.
I know. It was really sad. And so you did that for a while and you just decided that it wasn't for you. Or how did the calling happen to go back to school?
Yeah. So this is several years after I was in music. And I had then I was working in a different music company. I was doing artist management and I was a booking agent. And I left there and I actually ended up going to a company that did marketing for Broadway musicals. And I was their marketing and promotions coordinator. I think that was my role. At that point, I had several jobs and nothing was a match for me. And funnily enough, I ended up getting fired from that job, although I was not upset. And maybe it's not funnily enough because none of the jobs were really a match for me. And I just couldn't figure out what the heck was wrong with me.
Can I ask you why you got fired?
Yeah, well, so I'm the type of person where I want to do a good job. If I'm working on something, I want to do a good job. But inside of myself, I was just feeling just so mismatched with the job. I was definitely underperforming and it showed in my work. And honestly, I don't know if I've ever said this to anyone, especially on an interview. I wanted to get fired. And when they called me into their office, I was like, they're going to fire me. But what that did was that actually opened up the door. And this is pre-master's degree to leave the country. And I ended up backpacking Australia for 4 months.
Oh, I'm envious of that. I wish I would have done that.
It was a really amazing experience and journey. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do it. And then when I came back home, I came back to New York City. This was in 2006. I had thought about teaching. My mom had always said, I think you'd be a really great teacher. You're just so great with kids. You're so natural with them. And I said, you know what, let me just try this out. So in that summer of 2006, I interviewed for a very part-time job with a nonprofit that was looking for a teacher's assistant. And they gave me the job. And I would say by the second or third day of that job, I knew in my heart that that was the next step for me to teach. I applied for my master's degree. I did my master's at NYU, which was another dream for me, a school that I had always wanted to go to. I think actually I graduated with like a 3.9 GPA, and I was so proud of myself.
Good for you.
And I started teaching. Yeah.
Amazing. And so it sounds like at each step of your life, kind of what came in, or you were able to find what you wanted to do next.
Yeah, it is interesting when I look back at the path that I've been on up until this point. Without realizing it, I was always following my heart and following my intuition, even when it felt really painful. And that's what ultimately, had me leaving teaching to pursue entrepreneurship.
Some of our listeners might wonder, because they're not in New York City, about what a charter school is like. You taught at-risk youth. You said that you loved your students. And then you do talk about that period of depression and anxiety that many of us go through. And I just wondered if you could kind of give some color to that time in your life.
Yeah, that's such a great question, because it probably wouldn't be clear to a lot of people. And it wasn't clear to me at that time. But to work at the charter school I was at felt like a dream come true, because and this charter actually is massive all over New York City now. And I'm so appreciative of the work that they're doing. But as a teacher for a charter school, it's very rigorous. You are putting in very long hours. You do have resources that are at your fingertips that when I was teaching in a public school, I didn't have. Because there's so much more structure and rigor, the type of folks that are hired to do this job are, and I'm going to say this, are a high caliber of person. They really want to be there and they're willing to go the extra mile, which I was. But what happened for me was it just wasn't a match for the type of person that I am. I was exhausted from waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, walking to the subway, taking 2 subways to get to the stop, then walking to the school. And all of this was being done in the dark. And then I didn't leave the school until it was dark outside. And I rarely left the school during the day to see the sun. And it started to take a toll on me.
Yeah, it was like your whole life was evolving around the school completely.
Yes. And so lots of things started to set in for me. Mentally, physically, I started to become exhausted. And when I'm feeling that low, I know myself in the past, it can start to lead to really negative thoughts about who I am. And I had thoughts of, I'm such a loser. Why can everyone else wake up this early and go teach? And why is this such a problem for me? Why do all the teachers seem better than I do? And all of this just started to snowball for me and snowball, where I just thought I was horrible. Now, but here's the interesting thing. As all of this is happening, there's this tiny little voice, very calm voice, not a negative voice, saying, you are a really great teacher. You care about your students. Maybe the structure of this just doesn't fit who you are. And that seemed like an absurd thought to me, because, well, if you teach, you're a teacher in a classroom. There's no other way that you teach but that way. But I was willing to entertain this little voice that was kind of nudging me, my intuitive voice, if you will, or a voice connected to something greater than myself. And what ended up happening was this was 2010. I followed that voice. I walked into the school on a Monday morning and I gave my 2 weeks notice. Now, I think it's really important for me to share with your listeners when I did that. This actually was not a moment of empowerment and my head held high and my shoulders held back. It was a real moment of, wow, I really am such a loser because I'm letting the school down. I'm letting the staff down. I'm letting these students down. And these were kids who were used to people coming in and out of their lives all the time. And they didn't have that stability.
You're shouldering all of that guilt, even though it wasn't necessarily yours to take. But I think that's what happens to so many of us when we enter that negative spiral. And like when I'm listening to you, I hear like partial imposter syndrome, partial exhaustion, and just really, tell me if I'm correct in thinking this, that you're a perfectionist. You think You have very high standards for yourself, right? As a performer, at least at that time.
Yes, I would say at that time, and actually perfectionism is something that I have worked on for years now. And it's also something that I support my clients with too, because so many of my clients fall into that as well, having such high standards, which that's not a bad thing. But there's also a time to go, you know what, this is good enough and I am good enough and I'm going to move forward with this.
Yes. Oh, it's so true. I battle with perfectionism myself, and I have one of my daughters is a perfectionist. She's a senior in high school, and she is now just learning how to pace herself because it's do, 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 do. And for her to say, you know what, I may not do so well on this psychology test is a really big deal for her. And in the scheme of things, it's such a small thing, but right when it's in your head and it's your life, it seems much bigger.
Yes, absolutely agreed, 100%.
And so you went there. How was the principal? Was he or she supportive?
No. And I love that question because no one has ever asked me that before. And you bring me back to a very specific moment. Probably, I don't know, somewhere between when I gave my notice to a couple of days before my last day. I was at the school quite late. It was probably around 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And I walked out of my classroom and I shut the door and I saw her down the hallway. And I went to wave and she looked at me and just turned around. And you could say, well, maybe she didn't see you, but having worked at that school, like she wasn't that far away from me. And she was quite upset. I will say this one thing, though. In her defense, she was a very new principal. The school, so within the charter, this was their first school that they were opening in the Bronx. All the schools had been in Harlem. This was the very first one. She was a brand new principal. And I don't know what the feelings were that she was feeling.
Right. Or the pressures.
Exactly. Pressure and feeling let down. And everyone handles that differently. So it was very hard to receive that, but I wouldn't want to go and say, oh, she's such a bad person. It was very hurtful for me, but I don't know what she was feeling inside either.
Right. And that is such a important place to get. And I still work on that myself, right? Is like, it's not necessarily about me. It's about what that person might be going through. And just honoring that, right? So you ended up leaving, and then I believe what happened next, I want to hear it in your words, is that you did some soul searching. And how did that all come about?
Yeah. Well, so I left in December of that year, and it was, a couple of days before the holidays and before the school holiday break. So that was really tough. Christmas Eve in my family has traditionally been a large Christmas Eve with lots of family members and, how's school going? How's work going? And what really happened next was a bit of soul searching for sure, but also things fell into place in a way that I could have never imagined. And I think it really speaks to the power of taking a risk and the power of taking a leap and going against all safe norms when you are following your heart. So I ended up linking up with a private tutoring agency located in New York City and, wonderfully enough, owned by a woman. And I was fascinated by the fact that this was owned by a woman because, it seems like, it's a whole other world to think about businesses that were owned by women, especially with where I was at that time. In 2010, I wasn't rubbing elbows with other women-owned businesses. I had no idea about that.
Right. Absolutely. And so important to remember that, because I think like in 2022, yes, we've made progress. We still have a long way to go. Yeah. But it's a little bit more common, but it really is uncommon even today. And so I get that. So you were like, wow.
Yeah, I was so wowed. And I was also really blessed because I had the special education background tutors or support teachers were more in demand. And so she had students that she could place me with. And I was basically an independent contractor. And so I'd say probably a week after the 1st of January, I was placed with my first student. And so I traveled to...
Incredible.
Yeah, I traveled to a school. I worked with a student there. And what was so awesome about it was I got to go to the student's classroom, take him from his classroom. We'd go into the school's computer room where there was no one else. It was so quiet. And I got to really focus on what the student's needs were. And then this agency gave me a second student and then a third student. And all of a sudden I had these 3 students and for an hourly rate, I was making a pretty decent hourly rate because of the background that I had. And, still not super enough to make a living, but I was kind of like just getting by. I think it's important to say, like, I was living in New York City, so I was paying New York City rent prices. And even, 12, 13 years ago, rent was still very expensive in New York. It's at a totally different place now.
Yeah. Yes, no, very expensive. And that makes a huge difference. But you were able to fall forward, really. That's what it sounds like.
Yes. And the cool thing about this, and I would have never expected this, is that my father, who had been in the entrepreneurial space himself, he was an owner of a franchise. He owned one business and a franchise. He came to me and he said, a couple of weeks into this, maybe a month into doing this, he said, very nonchalantly, why don't you start your own tutoring business?
Yeah, and that hadn't occurred to you, which I understand.
It hadn't, but it sort of did because I was aware that I could do this on my own after working with these couple of students. And the thing that was really striking to me was that before I left the school, we had small reading groups with students. And I recognized the connection I'd have with small groups of students when I was left on my own with the students without anyone telling me how I had to do things, what I had to say, how I could and couldn't teach. And I saw the effect I had on these students and I saw their growth. And so when he said that to me, it was like, yes, I do have this unique ability with kids. I kind of was like, yeah, maybe I should do that. And so by March, now this is just go from December to March, I started my first business called Teacher on the Go. And I ended up working one-on-one with students. I had no idea how to market a business, but I'll tell you what I did. I sat at a Starbucks, I don't know, but sometimes it felt like every day during the week with this laptop that I had that I don't even think they make anymore. It was so small and the hinge was broken. So it was slanted to the side. And I'd go to Starbucks with my laptop and I'd go through my cell phone, which it was a BlackBerry at that time, I think. It wasn't even an iPhone, it was a BlackBerry.
And I remember those.
Yeah. And I'd go through my contacts and I went through the teacher contacts I had, the parent contacts I had, anyone that I knew had kids. And I started telling them the services that I was providing.
That's excellent. I mean, right? That's like what I've learned to call like relational sales, right? These were relationships that you had, like, they might have some warmer than the other. And you just let them know that what you were doing and you built it from. The other thing, though, that comes to mind is I've interviewed a lot of tech entrepreneurs and they talk about proof of concept. And what's really interesting about what you described is, with those 3 students, that was your proof of concept to know that what you could do if you could scale it up was sustainable and something you enjoyed.
Yeah. And thank you. I've actually never thought of that was proof of concept. I had no idea. I think it also speaks to kind of like marketing 101. Like, where do you start?
Yes.
Where do you start? Well, you start with what you know. So I know people, I know relationships, I know connections. All I need to do is open my mouth and say the words, this is what I'm doing. And this is what I'm looking for. Do you know of anyone? Are you anyone? And this is exactly what I teach my clients. It is the easiest first steps you can take. And actually, one of my clients, she just started dipping her toe into her business. And I said to her, okay, we're going to create an announcement that you're going to make. You're going to create, and she came up with the pricing. We'll create an introductory offer. That way you feel comfortable enough with the pricing that you can get behind it. And let's just have you talk to people. And within a week, she not only got her first client, the client said to her, your introductory rate is too low. I want to pay you double. And I'm not making this up at all.
I believe you. I believe you, because as women, I think that we tend to undervalue ourselves all the time, right?
Yeah.
Even as an introductory offer, like we feel like, okay, we shouldn't ask for too much. That is amazing.
Yeah.
When you were talking, I was thinking about, I'm an introvert, and the idea of approaching people in any kind of way makes me uncomfortable. So for those entrepreneurs who are introverts, but to your point, relationships and that kind of sales really does work, because it's not really sales. It's more like, this is what I do. If it works for you and it's something you need, let's talk.
Yes.
But do you have tips for someone who's a little bit more introverted?
Yeah. Well, here's what I know about introverts. So while I'm not an introvert, I'm an HSP, a highly sensitive person, and I have introverted tendencies. And many of the women that I work with are introverted and or are also HSPs, highly sensitive people. As an introverted person, you have a unique ability to make deep connections within intimate relationships and intimate connections. So introverted people are in general better at one-on-one or quite small groups of people, because you get to connect at a deeper level, which is more fulfilling to you. Because of that, you are naturally poised to be able to serve and support people at quite a high level.
I really like that. And the other thing that it made me think about is listening, that I enjoy listening to people. And I think that that's also a part of sales that's often overlooked, is really hearing what it is that people need.
Yes, I agree 100%. And that is also a skill a highly sensitive person has, an introverted person has, the willingness to listen deeply and really get what someone is sharing versus talking constantly or, being aggressive. And I'm not saying that an extroverted person is naturally aggressive, because I'm definitely more extroverted. But when you are willing and you can listen to someone, that leaves someone feeling seen and heard. That leaves someone feeling more connected to you and feeling like, I'm gotten, this person gets me. I want to work with them. I want to invest in their service or product.
Exactly. I love that. And so you built your teaching business. At some point, you had an epiphany of the non-9 to 5, which is your current business.
Yeah.
Walk us through how you got there.
It's actually another journey. It's not like, oh, well, then this happened, but maybe believe it or not.
I believe you.
So while I was doing Teacher on the Go, I've thrown myself rigorously into personal growth and development for, at this point, probably 20 plus years. I was taking a workshop where we had a coach. It was a workshop for a small group of women. And the workshop was all about turning your passion into profits. I think that's what she called it.
I swear that I've been in that workshop. I wonder if it's the same person, but I'm not going to do it on air. I'll ask you after.
Okay, we'll talk about it. And so I'm doing Teacher on the Go, and something is gnawing at me saying, this is not it for the long term. You're good at this. You've been able to really make these connections with both students and parents, but this is not it for the long term. And what I became excited about was the idea of me coaching, like this woman was in this workshop, and teaching adults, because I just was feeling the energy of that. And then it took me a bit of time, but then I recognized, well, wait a minute. I've been doing this now. I think at that point it was almost 2.5 years. And I've been able to stand on my own 2 feet, pursue this work, and not go back to a 9-to-5 job, and do this on my own. So if I've been able to do this on my own, there are others that want to do this, and I can teach them and support them and coach them and guide them and train them how to do this as well. And so that then became my journey into creating this. But when that came to me, it took me about another year to a year and a half to birth the non 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's not like it just happens like that. You like put it on your letterhead and you're ready for business, right? That's not how it rolls.
No, not at all. And honestly, it took another, maybe say taking another is not the right way to put it, but I ended up going through another depression and another bout of anxiety because I couldn't figure out how to get this together. And what ended up happening was, and I think this is really worth sharing too, I went to go see a woman speak who was doing a couple-day event. She was a business mentor, and what she was speaking about really resonated with me. And I'm the type of person where if I'm investing in a workshop, I'm going to a talk, I'm also going to participate. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to get my money's worth, so to speak. And so I'm participating a lot. And we went on a break for coffee or something. And I walked to the back of the room and I start engaging in a conversation with a woman who was working with the woman who was speaking. Talking with her, I don't remember what I was saying, but she said something to me that was very clear. And I remember everything from that point forward. She stopped me mid-sentence and she said, Jen, we see a lot of potential in you. And the moment she said that, I would never forget this. I put my hand over my heart and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. And I got this really visceral reaction. And I looked at her in the eyes and I gritted my teeth and I said, that is the worst thing that anyone has ever said to me. I will be damned if I live a life full of potential. And
wow.
Yes.
What was that about?
What that was about was that woman was 100% right, because I was living with this potential, but I really wasn't owning it. I really wasn't going to that next level. I was someone who would get this idea. I would I had the idea of starting this business. I would freak out about it. I would tell myself I was a loser. I'd say I couldn't do it. I'd flounder. And look, it's all okay. Like I'm a human being, but there was something that was going on for me. And the best part about this is that I had the opportunity to invest in the support from the woman who was leading this event. And at that time, I was doing Teacher on the Go. I was also working another part-time job. I was just getting by at that time of my life. And I was also over $100,000 in debt.
Student loans. That's NYU.
Yeah, that's
Great
NYU.
Education, but very expensive. Yeah.
I always look back and I say, do I regret taking out $100,000 or over that in student loans? And I don't have any regrets in going to that school because I'm an experienced person, and that experience was wonderful. The people I met, the teachers I worked with was so fantastic. Could I have gone to a different school and saved a lot of money? Yes. So maybe that would have been better, but it's the choice that I made at that point. And so that's the decision that I made.
I so get that. Yes.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I also went to NYU for graduate school, so I understand.
I don't know if I know that. We probably have so much more in common than we realize.
Exactly. And I'll just throw this out there. My older daughter decided her early decision choice was Sarah Lawrence, which, is a good school, but it is not inexpensive. And
yeah.
I have had that conversation with her of, the return on investment of your education and what you want to do. And I don't know. I don't know if it's that it's not until you live it that you begin to understand it, or if truly this is like the right place, like what you were saying about NYU, the experience. She really feels like this is the right place for her. So
yeah,
we'll check in 4 years and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was over $100,000 in debt, and I had this opportunity to make this investment. And for me, having support in place is something that's really important, but also there was this feeling of I should be able to do this on my own.
Should.
Yeah, I should be able to do this on my own. I shouldn't have to do this. And I made a bold decision. I took a very radical action to take the only credit card that I had one credit card, and put the deposit on my card. And it was the best decision I could have ever have made. I think it's really valuable to share that that woman is still my mentor. It is 9+ years later. I still invest. I make very high levels of financial and time, both financial and time. I put a lot into it. But because of that, and because I've been willing to go beyond my fears of making the financial investment, beyond my fears of how much time it takes to be a student and a client in a very rigorous program, I have been able to create what I have. And it's been amazing and beyond my wildest dreams. And I would say that the biggest thing is the woman that I've become, the confidence that I have, how I see myself, how I handle situations, be it personal or professional. And that is worth all the money in the world. And so I really value support. And, I talk to prospective clients and my clients about how their investment in, becoming a member of the 9 to 5 is honestly not just about successful self-employment. It's about so much more. And it is about becoming the woman that you say you want to be and the woman you've always wanted to become and really transforming. And it's so important.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And so it took you about a year to get it up and running based on what you were saying before. And you went to another coaching event, and so personal coaching has helped you as well. This question is coming to me. I don't have it written down, but there are so many coaches, right, in general right now.
Yeah.
What would you say? How can someone determine if a coach is the right fit for her?
Yeah. So, what's coming to my mind is when I connect with a prospective client, I will offer up, first and foremost, an hour of my time. And that's really important that I do that. Well, even before that, so I'm sort of sharing this, I'm answering your question in two ways. I'm sharing it from my perspective, and then I want to share it from a prospective client's perspective. So in my perspective, first and foremost, you're filling out an application because I need to first see, is there an alignment? And then if there is an alignment from, the information you're sharing with me, then I want to invite you to a call, and a gifted call to connect with me. And then on that call, we're going to go really deep because I need to hear what's going on for you. What's not working? Where are you struggling? And my aim is that you feel seen and heard, because if you don't feel seen and heard by another person or someone that you are prospectively going to work with, then what are you doing, right? It doesn't make any sense.
One question for the ones, they do an application process. How do you handle the ones that aren't a fit?
Well, I'll read through the application. And if there's something that's really, glaring that like, hey, this really isn't a match, I'll get in touch with them directly. And I'll say, this is why I see that we're not a match. And I'll give them, if I have a recommendation for another coach or a resource, because I know that person, the fact that you filled out an application says so much, that you took the time to sit down and answer these questions. So I want to be able to give you some sort of support moving forward. And I know tons of amazing people. And if there's someone else that I say, hey, so-and-so would be a better fit for this person, I want to connect them together. Or, hey, here's a book that I'd like you to start with. Or, hey, here's a podcast I want you to listen to.
Excellent. I was curious about that. And so once you've gone through, you've gifted a call, you really want to get into the deep part. And that must be hard to do, I would think, in one conversation, because I know, like for myself, I'm pretty guarded. I don't know if I would be able to maybe I would, though. I don't know. That's interesting. So how does that work?
Yeah, well, I would say, and it's interesting you're saying that, the people that I connect best with are willing to go deep, And because I've been doing this for so long, we can accomplish so much in 1 hour. And sometimes we go over, it might be like 5 or 10 minutes because like there's so much that I want to cover. And I share my personal story because it's important to make that connection. But let me kind of go from there to when someone is looking for a coach, right? So you want to first know that you are open to support, that you're willing to receive support, that you don't have a belief that you can do it all on your own. Or if you do have a belief you can do it on your own, you also recognize, hey, even though I feel like I can do this all on my own, I really need help. So I'm willing to seek help, because not everyone is willing. So you've got to be willing to do that. And then it's Does this person's energy resonate with me? Do I feel seen and heard connecting with them? Does their story resonate with me? I really think that that's first and foremost. It's so important for that connection. It's so important to have that. And then from there, it's within you the willingness to trust where your heart and your intuition are guiding you. So I've had clients who have felt a connection to me where I absolutely feel a connection to them. And then they're afraid to take those steps. Makes so much sense. They're afraid to make a financial investment. They're afraid to make a time investment. And so all these reasons come up. And I have no attachment whether someone steps into work with me, but I'm going to support them to see those resistances and to ask themselves to trust what they're feeling and hear. Because whatever's in our heart, whatever we're intuitively feeling, there is nothing more powerful than that. We have a logical brain. Our brain will say, I can't afford that. I can't put the time into that. My partner, my spouse, my husband, my whoever, they won't agree that I do this. And that's all coming from the mind, the logical brain, the reasoning. But then if you drop down into your heart, into your intuition, what's really there? Where I really want support, where I really feel seen and heard from this person. I really feel that I think that this could make a difference. And that's where you want to make a decision from.
That is so well said. I love that.
I love your questions, by the way.
Oh,
I've done so many podcast interviews and I love the depth and the uniqueness of your questions because it allows me to say so much more than I have ever before on a podcast interview. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. You're very open to sharing.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was wondering, when you bring someone on, do you work with them personally? Do you work with them in a group setting? How does that work?
Yeah. So members of the 9 to 5 both work with me privately, one-on-one, and within our community. So all of our programs have a private aspect with me where we have private coaching calls. And then we have a beautiful, safe and sacred, very intentionally curated online forum. It is not a private Facebook group. I feel very proud to say that. When we first started, it was like a private Facebook group, but I can't have people, I don't want people on Facebook. I don't want to be on Facebook when they're getting all these notifications. So we have a private online forum and I am e-coaching. Clients are posting specific plans. They're asking specific questions. They have real-time support with me. I'm on the forum almost every single day, checking in on them. And then we do once a month, what are called community-wide teaching and support calls, where we all join on Zoom. And I am teaching a specific concept or some sort of teaching or training that I'm bringing forward. There is participation. Sometimes there's group work that we're doing. I also do community-wide trainings where we come together for a full day where we're going into in-depth into a training. And I think it's really important for me to share that the approach that I take with the work that we do is a dual approach. So we have an inner approach and an outer approach, meaning, and I'll speak to the outer first. The outer is the practical steps, the actionable steps, right? So think back to how when I started my first business, the actionable steps I was taking was I was calling people, I was sending emails to people, I was marketing my services in that way. So I'm teaching women how to network intentionally, how to enjoy it, and how to do it when you're more introverted, because a number of the women I work with are very introverted to the point where it can feel almost paralyzing to connect with someone. And I work with them with that. And what ends up happening is that their confidence rises and they make those deep connections. So we're talking about practical on one hand. Then the inner work is the ability to really go follow, listen to your intuition, really work through the fears, the doubts, the worries, learn how to, in truth, and this may sound very radical, but this is really in truth, how to rewire. We're rewiring your brain to stop walking down this same path. So if you have a pathway in your brain that says, I am not good enough, I am not good enough, I am not good enough, we can't create any type of growth or success from that place. So I share very specific tools to rewire that. And I'd say one of the biggest inner components that women hands down tell me all the time is that they have confidence that they've never had before. And if you have confidence that you never have before, you can do anything. And that's not lip service. If you feel confident, you can create just about anything.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really true also what you're saying about neuroplasticity, and that you have to, kind of shut down those old pathways, know that they exist, that you can always go back to them, but then take a chance and maybe work with some new pathways as well. And you're a perfect example, right? You talk about having gone through multiple bouts of depression. And I'm sure, I'm not assuming your life is perfect today, but you certainly present as a very confident woman.
Thank you so much. And I like to think that I'm a confident person, but just like anyone else, I have my moments. I would not want your listeners to think when they listen to this that I am perfect, that my life is perfect, that my business is perfect. And if I think that if any human being comes across as perfect, like cancel, clear, delete, it doesn't exist. It's not
Yes.
true. I go through my hardships. I think the only difference is that because I have really made it my focus in life to personally and professionally grow myself at all costs rigorously, I've been able to create what I've created. And when I go through hardships, and I'll share transparently, 2022 was probably one of my hardest years in business. I had someone tell me, your business is a scam and you're a phony and you're a fake. I got into a car accident where my car was totaled. I battled very severe health issues where I was constantly fatigued, making it difficult to get out of bed in the morning. My dog was on the verge of dying. And that's just to name a couple of things.
Yeah.
But I share that because I worked through those things because of the tools that I have, the support that I have in place. And here I am in 2023 in a much different space, in a much different energy, still focused and still moving forward no matter what.
Yes, I love that. And I love the fact that you give examples of how it seems like everything kind of always happens at once, really difficult things, and that you handle them. And right, that's what we do, hopefully, in life as we learn more about ourselves, is we learn to handle these things in whatever way we can, hopefully in a non-dysfunctional way. But we do what we can do. And I could see the benefit of a coach there too, is helping you make those decisions and have someone outside of yourself to talk to who's been there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've learned on this journey, growth, transformation, change, success cannot and will never be made in isolation. Support is a must. It's a must. And you've got to be willing to ask for it as well.
Yes, I totally agree. So a few more questions. I know we're running a little bit long, but you've just shared so much great information. What are 3 tips that you have for women who may be on the precipice of a career or life change?
Yeah, it's a great question. So 3 tips for a woman that might be on a career or life change, right? The precipice of that. So, something I shared earlier is allow yourself to, and this might sound a little bit woo-woo, but allow yourself to drop into your heart and your intuition. Where is it guiding you? Feel into that versus what's logical. Go into your heart. What is that part saying? That's number 1. Number 2 is if you feel a call to do something, to make a change, and you don't know why you have this call, but you keep getting a call, a nudge, a feeling. I want to be really clear that you're receiving that because you are meant to go in that direction. If you weren't meant to go in that direction, you wouldn't get the call or the nudge. So I've never gotten a call or nudge to be an accountant. I'm not meant to go in that direction. I've gotten the call or nudge to start a business, to, work with people. And it can be scary when we get those. But when you get the call, you're meant to follow it.
Love
and
it.
The third thing I would say is be willing to invest time and resources into support. Don't do it in isolation. You don't have to make decisions in isolation. When you have someone who has been there, who has walked the path, And you can sort of let your guard down and be willing to trust, and trust that you know that you can trust someone in supporting you. There is such a world of possibilities out there for you.
That reminds me of and I don't mean this like, it sounds funny to say like a Dr. Seuss book, but for some reason I visualized that book, The Places You Can Go, I think it's called. Anyway, but it's true. I wanted to just end this. I do want you to let listeners know where they can find out more about you, but I also just wanted to ask you personally, I don't know why I always go with 3. You can do 2, you can do 4. Personal or professional wins that you would like to share.
Oh, wow. Well, I would say the fact that I did start this business is a huge win. We could talk for another hour probably about the level of depression that I went through before I started the non-9 to 5 and what was really going through my mind, because doing something like this was literally just a dream. It never felt real. So the fact that I even started this business is absolutely a win. I would say another win is, and I've talked about the depression. It doesn't mean that I won't fall into depression, but because of the tools and support I have in place, when I have over the last number of years, and there have been moments of that, it's been so much shorter, just so much shorter of a time frame, which has showed me, while I'm really growing, I don't have to be in this space. I can feel these uncomfortable, sad, anxiety-ridden feelings, but I can also take steps forward through it.
That's a huge win.
Thank you.
Huge.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Another thing I would say is that, and this is just popping into my mind, when my business was not even 2 years old, I moved halfway across the country, so I don't live in New York City anymore. I live in Austin, Texas. People were like, wow, that's, not only is that such a big move, but, you just started this business. But I knew in my heart that I would get here and I would just continue connecting with people. And so I was able to do that. And so I think the things that sometimes we think are impossible are really way more possible than we actually realize. But the only way we would know is by taking the steps forward. Because if we just stand still, we'll never know.
Oh, that is so true. At least taking an action. Are the majority of your clients virtual, by the way?
Yeah, they are. So a number of them happen to be in Austin because I'm here too. Mm-hmm. But I have, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I have a client in Canada, a client in Arizona. I've worked with women in California, in Florida. I've had clients, years ago, I had a client who lived half the year in Ibiza. Yes, so everyone is virtual.
Everyone. And at one time, how many clients? Do you have like a maximum? Because I would imagine you must get burnt out if it's like, 200, say.
Yeah. No, it's really just, I'm looking for who the right match is. And obviously what I can fit into my calendar. But there are openings now for sure that we have at the non-9 to 5. So yeah, we take women and some men as they make sense. If they make sense, then I want to support them and they're coming into the community.
Definitely. And where can our listeners learn more about you and the non-9 to 5?
Yeah. So my website is just the9to5.com, all spelt out. I'm also on LinkedIn, just my first and last name, Jen Shultz, and recently just started a YouTube channel, which is also the non-9 to 5. I would say those are the best places because you can see videos of me talking and teaching things. Yeah.
I love that. I did not see the YouTube channel. I'm going to check that out for sure.
Cool.
Thank you so much for coming on SheVentures today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to SheVentures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.